Do you know what it truly costs to be liked? Most people never ask themselves this question because they are addicted to the subtle warmth of approval, to the soft applause of validation, to the illusion that being liked is the same as being valued. They move through life believing that smiles mean safety, that kindness guarantees loyalty, that likability is the currency of connection. But beneath that pleasant lie, Machiavelli whispers a truth so cold it can freeze the spine. People adore what they can use, and they respect what they cannot control. So let me ask you again, more directly this time, how much of your life has been quietly stolen by your desire to be liked? Because the world you walk through each day is designed to exploit that desire. It weaponizes it. It turns your softness into vulnerability, your generosity into leverage, your openness into a map of weaknesses others can navigate with precision. It teaches you to smile when you should stare, to apologize when you should confront, to shrink when you should stand, to seek harmony where you should demand boundaries. You become agreeable, predictable, digestible, the kind of person who blends politely into the background of other people's ambitions. And yet deep inside you, beneath the layers of politeness and unspoken resentment, something darker waits, a part of you that is tired of being overlooked, a part that wants to stop nodding, stop bending, stop pretending, a part Machiavelli understood intimately, the part that knows respect is worth infinitely more than approval. Respect is forged in discomfort, in decisiveness, in strategic distance. It emerges from a person who refuses to be easily influenced, manipulated, or swayed, a person who can walk alone without begging for company, who can say no without guilt, who can embrace conflict without trembling. Respect is built by those who are willing to be disliked when necessary. And the world, in its secret admiration of strength, cannot help but bow to such people. But you were taught the opposite, weren't you? You were told that niceness is the highest virtue, that making everyone comfortable means you're a good person, that harmony is a sign of maturity. You learned to soften your voice, to dilute your opinions, to make excuses for people who hurt you, to carry burdens that were never yours. And each time you did, the world took another piece of you. It smiled sweetly while stealing from your spine. It rewarded you with temporary comfort while slowly taking your strength. This is the invisible tax of likability, the slow erosion of your identity. Machiavelli wrote that it is safer to be feared than loved, not because he worshipped cruelty, but because he understood human nature. People love you when you're convenient. They respect you when you're consequential. And most people are too selfish, too impatient, too self-involved to truly appreciate someone who bends, adapts, and caters to their comfort. They don't admire your good heart, they exploit it. They don't honor your compromises, they expect them. They don't reward your patience, they expand their demands until you break. To be liked is to give people permission to shape you into what they want. To be respected is to shape the space around you into what you demand. But here's the darkest truth of all, the one most people are too afraid to admit. You will never be powerful if you need people to love you. Power requires emotional independence. It requires the ability to walk into a room without waiting for approval, without scanning faces for signs of acceptance, without negotiating your worth moment by moment based on how others react. Power demands that you anchor yourself within yourself, not in the fragile opinions of a world that changes its mind by the hour. Think of the strongest people you've ever met, not the loudest, not the most dramatic, but the ones who carried an aura that made others stand straighter in their presence. Those people were not obsessed with being liked. They did not apologize for their standards. They did not explain themselves to everyone. They moved with a kind of quiet certainty, a calm refusal to be rattled. Their strength wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable, and deep down you respected them, even if you didn't always like them. Because respect is born in the places where others cannot touch you. Imagine for a moment that you walk through the world with this kind of presence, not arrogant, not cruel, but self-possessed. Imagine that when someone tried to manipulate you with guilt, you didn't fold. When someone tried to push past your boundaries, you didn't rationalize it, you confronted it. When someone expected you to play small so they could feel big, you didn't shrink. Imagine that your silence carried more weight than other people's shouting. Imagine that you were no longer afraid of disappointing anyone. What would that version of you look like? What kind of respect would you command? What kind of life would unfold around you once people realized you were not built for their convenience? Most people will never experience this version of themselves because stepping into it requires something they fear more than failure, more than loneliness, more than rejection. It requires abandoning the need to be liked. That need is a prison disguised as comfort, a velvet cage, a gently padded trap. It keeps you soft when you should be sharpening. It keeps you agreeable when you should be decisive. It keeps you waiting for permission when you should already be moving. It keeps you hungry for validation instead of hungry for power. Machiavelli understood something that almost no modern mind dares to accept. When you stop trying to be liked, you stop being easily controlled, because people control you through your emotional dependencies. They know you don't want to upset them. They know you fear confrontation. They know you want to be seen as a good person. They know you feel guilty saying no, and they use those feelings against you. But once you detach yourself from the need to be liked, those chains fall away. You become unpredictable. You become harder to influence. You become someone who can't be manipulated through approval or threatened with rejection. You become someone other people must calculate around rather than easily shape. This is the core of Machiavellian respect, a person who refuses to be governed by the emotional expectations of others. And yet, this transformation is not as simple as saying, "I don't care what people think." That's a lie people tell themselves to mask insecurities. Real detachment is deeper, colder, more disciplined. It means you do not chase validation, but neither do you reject it. You simply remain untouched. It means you understand that being liked is pleasant, but it is never your goal. It means you hold your ground even when it trembles beneath your feet. It means you are willing to lose the affection of others to protect the integrity of yourself. It means choosing respect over comfort. Respect is born from consequence, the awareness that if someone crosses a line there will be a price. Not rage, not chaos, not emotional explosion, but a firm, undeniable consequence. You distance yourself, you withdraw access, you remove privileges. You stop investing, you walk away. You do not threaten, you act. And once people understand that about you, they begin to respect you. They may never admit it, but they feel it. They sense the boundary in your voice, in your eyes, in your silence. They measure their words more carefully. They stop taking liberties. They stop assuming you'll tolerate everything. They begin to treat you as someone with weight, someone with presence, someone who commands, even without demanding. But to reach that state, you must first undergo a rebirth, the death of the old version of you, the one who lived for approval. That version will fight you. It will whisper fears in your ear. It will warn you that people will leave if you stop pleasing them. It will tell you that standing up for yourself is dangerous. It will tremble at the thought of conflict. It will cling to the illusion that likability is safety. You must silence it, because as long as that weaker version of you lives, you cannot rise. You are here, reading this, because part of you already senses that truth. Part of you feels the weight of all those years spent dimming your fire to protect the comfort of others. Part of you is tired of walking lightly so others can walk casually over you. Part of you is exhausted by the unspoken resentment that comes from giving too much and receiving too little. That part of you, the one that feels the burn of injustice, is not a flaw. It is the beginning of your ascension. Machiavelli believed that human beings do not change until they become dissatisfied with their own weakness. And maybe you are finally at that threshold. Maybe the quieter, more dangerous part of you is beginning to wake. Maybe you are starting to realize that the life you want cannot be built with the personality you were taught to have. To unlock the dark power of respect, you must first confront the truth about the world. People admire strength, even when they pretend to resent it. They follow certainty. They gravitate toward those who do not need them. They trust the person who trusts themselves. They listen to the voice that does not shake. They remember the ones who walk differently, who speak differently, who do not hand out pieces of themselves in exchange for affection. The world does not value the nice, it values the necessary. And if you want to become necessary, if you want to walk with presence, command attention without asking, and shape your world instead of being shaped by it, then you must be willing to step into the dark clarity Machiavelli wrote about. You must be willing to stop being liked so you can start being respected. You don't notice at first when the world begins to test you. It happens quietly, subtly, the way shadows lengthen at dusk without anyone realizing that day has slipped into something colder. It starts with small requests, Small impositions, small moments when someone pushes against the edge of your boundaries, just to see if the walls hold or if they crumble. They're not doing it consciously. Human nature is far more instinctual than we like to admit. People test softness the way predators test the wind. They sense pliability, and before long, they discover whether you are someone they can lean on or someone they can lean against. And if you've spent your life trying to be liked, then you already know which side of that equation you've been on. Machiavelli understood something brutal about human beings. We don't respect what costs us nothing. When you offer yourself freely, without resistance, without standards, without consequence, the world consumes you without hesitation. Not because it hates you, but because it simply follows the path of least resistance. You become the easy water it drinks from, the easy warmth it uses, the easy shoulder it cries on. You become the comfort at the expense of your own strength. And people, in their blindness, never realize that taking too much eventually poisons the well. You've felt it. You know the quiet sting of being taken advantage of, the cold ache of being invisible when you need help, the bitterness of being remembered only when someone wants something from you. And you blame yourself, don't you? You think you weren't kind enough, patient enough, giving enough. So you try harder, you give more, you soften further, and the cycle tightens like a noose around your identity. But the truth is simple. You have been living by the wrong currency. People treat you based on what they believe you're willing to lose. If you're terrified of conflict, they'll use conflict to control you. If you fear being disliked, they'll withhold affection to pull your strings. If you're scared of disappointing others, they'll manufacture guilt to keep you compliant. Human beings have always used fear and guilt as levers, often without even realizing it, because they work, because they are efficient, because they are ancient, and the person who cannot endure disapproval will never hold power over their own life. Think back to the last time you said yes when everything inside you said no. Think about the way your voice softened, the way your posture shrank, the way your words became careful and diluted and crafted to avoid negative reaction. You told yourself it was kindness. You told yourself it was maturity. But deep down, beneath the rationalizations, you felt the truth. You were negotiating your integrity to buy temporary peace. But temporary peace always comes with long-term consequences. The world doesn't remember your intention. It remembers your allowance. When you allow someone to take from you, they learn they can take. When you let disrespect slip once, you teach them it is safe to deliver again. When you forgive without boundaries, you teach them that consequences do not exist in your world, at least not for them. And the bitter irony is that by trying to be easy to love, you make yourself easy to hurt. This is why Machiavelli taught rulers, and, by extension, any human who wants control over their own life, to embrace the discomfort of being firm, not cruel, not tyrannical, firm, a wall that doesn't crack, a voice that doesn't tremble, a presence that doesn't bend simply because someone frowns. Because firmness earns respect, and respect earns stability, and stability, not affection, is the foundation of power. But you must understand something deeper. Respect is not an external effect. It is an internal condition. People respond to the energy you bring into the room long before they respond to your words. They register the voltage of your presence before they register the content of your message. The person who is grounded in themselves, who does not chase, who does not beg, who does not justify, radiates something primal that others cannot fully name but instinctively obey. Respect begins in silence. It begins in the way you carry yourself before you speak. It begins in the way you look at people without shrinking, the way you let pauses linger instead of filling them nervously, the way you remain stable even when someone tries to provoke you. People test your stability more than they test your kindness. They want to see if you can hold your center, and if you can't, they will never treat you as someone worth respecting. Consider the difference between a person who walks into a room with a desperate hunger to be accepted versus someone who walks in anchored in themselves. The first scans the room for approval, laughs too quickly, nods too easily, dilutes their presence to avoid friction. They become socially malleable, their identity bending and curving to fit the expectations around them. The world sees them as pleasant and insignificant. The second type speaks less, observes more, moves with purpose rather than rushing to fill empty spaces. They don't try to win you. They let you evaluate them, and they do not fear your conclusion. Their self-worth is not on trial when they interact with others, and because of that, the world senses a deeper gravity in their presence. The person who needs nothing holds the power. This is why detaching from likability is not a rejection of humanity, it is a reclamation of your identity. It is the process of removing the strings that the world has quietly tied to your emotional organs. Those strings yank and pull every time someone disapproves of you, every time someone frowns, every time someone is disappointed, every time someone says you've changed, every time someone implies you're selfish for no longer sacrificing yourself. Strings are comfortable until you try to move, and then you realize you're not free. Breaking those strings is painful. People will react. They will question the new firmness in your tone, the new clarity in your boundaries, the new distance in your interactions. They will call you cold. They will say you're acting strange. They will claim you're becoming arrogant, difficult, unrecognizable. Do you know why? Because the version of you they benefited from is dying, and that death feels like disrespect to them, even though it is actually the beginning of your rebirth. If you have always been the understanding one, the forgiving one, the one who adjusts, the one who sacrifices, then your evolution will feel like rebellion in the eyes of those who relied on your compliance. The truth is simple. When you stop sacrificing yourself for others, the only people who complain are those who profited from your previous suffering. But here is the twisted beauty behind this transformation. The very people who resist your boundaries most fiercely are the first ones to respect you later. Why? Because respect is often born from loss, the loss of access, the loss of privilege, the loss of advantage. People appreciate you most when they realize they no longer have the ease they once enjoyed. Machiavelli understood this. He believed that fear, not terror but the awareness of consequence, sharpens people's loyalty and deepens their respect. Not because they are afraid of harm, but because they are afraid of losing connection to something valuable. The version of you who lives for validation is plentiful. The version of you who commands respect is rare. People value the rare, and rarity is created by boundaries, by self-possession, by the refusal to be consumed by the opinions of others. It is created by the ability to walk away, to say no, to disappoint, to endure disapproval without trembling. Every time you embrace this discomfort, you become rarer. Every time you choose integrity over likability, you become stronger. Every time you confront conflict instead of avoiding it, you become more respected. But the path to this transformation is not gentle. It is not poetic or pretty. It is brutal. It is emotionally violent. It requires you to confront the darkest truth about yourself, that you have been shaping your life around the fear of being judged, and judgment is a ghost. It has no substance unless you bow to it. You must begin by understanding that human admiration is one of the cheapest resources on earth. People hand it out freely. They give it to celebrities they will never meet. They give it to influencers they've never spoken to. They give it to strangers who say things they already agree with. But human respect, real spine-deep respect, is rare. It must be earned. It must be built. It must be forged in the fire of your willingness to be unliked by those who cannot handle the strength you are stepping into. And once you commit to this path, your life will begin to change in ways that are uncomfortable but necessary. People will pull away. Let them. People will question your newfound certainty. Ignore them. People will accuse you of being selfish. Smile quietly. People will miss the old you. Let them grieve. The old you died so the real you could live. You must also prepare for the inner war, because the greatest enemy on this path is not the world. It is the part of you that has been conditioned to fear disapproval. That part of you will throw every emotional weapon it has at you. It will whisper, "You're being cruel." It will warn, "People will leave." It will panic, "What if you end up alone?" It will try to resurrect the old patterns, the old habits, the old softness. Because the part of you that lived for validation will fight to survive, and it must be defeated. This internal war is the rite of passage Machiavelli spoke about. The transformation from someone governed by emotion to someone governed by intention. Not emotionless, not hollow, not robotic, but self-governed. No longer seeking constant reassurance from the world, no longer negotiating your worth, no longer trying to be the person everyone approves of. When you step into this new state of being, the texture of your life changes. Conversations shift. People listen more closely when you speak. You begin to notice how often others seek your opinion. Your absence becomes more noticeable because your presence carries more weight. People become careful with their words. They become more honest around you. They second-guess their assumptions. Decisions become easier. Boundaries become clearer. You feel less drained, less resentful, less stretched thin, not because the world changed, but because you did. And once this transformation begins, something remarkable happens. You start to respect yourself. Not in the shallow way the self-help world describes, but in the Machiavellian sense, the sense of knowing you have become someone capable of surviving without emotional dependency. Someone capable of saying what you mean, standing where you choose, defending what you value. Someone capable of holding yourself upright even when the world tries to pull you in every direction. Self-respect is the foundation upon which all external respect is built. People follow the lead you take with yourself. If you allow yourself to be disrespected, they will disrespect you. If you allow yourself to be exhausted, they will exhaust you. If you allow yourself to be used, they will use you. But the moment you begin treating yourself as someone worthy of consequence, the world recalibrates around you. And slowly, inevitably, a new version of your life begins to form. A life where you are not easily impressed or easily manipulated. A life where your time is valued because you value it. A life where your presence is felt because it is not freely given. A life where people think carefully before crossing you. A life where you speak less, observe more, and act with precision. A life where your silence is a statement. A life where your boundaries are undeniable. A life where you command respect without needing to demand it. This is the dark power Machiavelli spoke of. Not cruelty, not domination, but the cold, unshakable clarity that comes from no longer craving approval. And now the question stands before you, quiet but impossible to avoid. Are you willing to continue living as someone who needs to be liked, or are you ready to become someone who demands respect without asking for it? If you're ready, then the path ahead is about to grow even darker, even sharper, even more revealing. There comes a moment in every person's life, a quiet, almost imperceptible moment, when the balance of power shifts. A moment when your patience runs out, when your tolerance dissolves, when the part of you that once begged for acceptance finally opens its eyes and sees the truth of the world, not the softened version you were raised with, not the filtered one society sells, but the raw, unembellished reality that Machiavelli understood centuries before you ever breathed your first breath, that humans are loyal to advantage, devoted to utility, and faithful to strength. And in that moment, the universe offers you a choice. You can collapse back into who you were, clinging to the fragile comfort of being liked, or you can step into the darkness of becoming respected. To understand this transformation deeply, to embed it into the marrow of your psychology, you must confront the truth about human nature that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. People do not respond to your intentions, your kindness, your softness, or your goodwill. They respond to your boundaries. They respond to your consequences. They respond to the invisible negotiation of power that unfolds in every interaction, every silence, every reaction, every micro moment where dominance is subtly weighed and exchanged. You've noticed this before, haven't you? Those unspoken power games that happen between two people standing too close. That quiet tension when someone tests the limits of your patience. That slight smirk someone gives when they realize you won't stand up for yourself. Those moments linger in your memory not because they were dramatic, but because they were revealing. You saw who you were in those moments, and it wasn't who you wanted to be. But to change it, you must understand the dark principle Machiavelli held above all else. You teach people how to treat you not through your words, but through what you allow. Think of the last time someone disrespected you subtly. Maybe they cut you off mid-sentence. Maybe they joked at your expense in a way that cut deeper than you let on. Maybe they ignored your boundaries. Maybe they dismissed your discomfort. You felt the sting, but you swallowed it. You told yourself it wasn't worth the confrontation. You told yourself you didn't want to cause tension. But do you know what they learned in that moment? Not that you were kind, not that you were considerate, not that you took the high road. They learned that you are safe to disrespect. Human beings are always watching, always learning, always recalibrating based on the feedback you give them. They don't analyze it consciously. The human mind is wired to detect weakness, compliance, submission, and emotional vulnerability. It senses who it can push and who it should fear. It senses who bends and who breaks. It senses who commands respect without ever raising their voice. Your silence has taught more lessons to the world than your words ever have. And here lies the root of your suffering. You've been fighting the wrong battle. You've been trying to convince people with kindness, but people don't respect kindness unless it is paired with strength. You've been trying to earn loyalty through generosity, but generosity without boundaries becomes a cage others trap you in. You've been trying to win respect through sacrifice, but sacrifice without consequence becomes an invitation for more exploitation. You cannot negotiate respect through likability. Respect is born when people realize there is a limit to what you will tolerate, a point of no return, a line that, if crossed, costs them something they value. And until you establish that line firmly, unapologetically, consistently, you will always belong to the lowest rank in the hierarchy of human dynamics, the agreeable, the compliant, the convenient. You cannot rise from that position until you understand the most important Machiavellian principle of all: people respect what they fear losing. Not because they are malicious, not because they are evil, but because humans are designed to prioritize survival. Social survival, emotional survival, psychological survival, even reputational survival. And when you train people to believe that they can disrespect you without consequence, you remove the evolutionary incentive for them to value you. So the question becomes, what must you become for people to fear losing you? Not in the sense of emotional dependency, but in the sense of strategic value. You must become the person whose presence adds weight to a room, the person whose absence is felt, the person who does not crumble under pressure, the person who does not betray themselves to maintain harmony, the person who can walk away, not as a performance, but as a reality. Because the ability to walk away is the most respected language in the world. Look back at your life, trace the scars, study the patterns. You will notice something haunting. The people who hurt you the most were the ones who believed you would stay no matter what. They believed this because you trained them to. You showed them forgiveness without consequence. You showed them loyalty without reciprocity. You showed them patience without boundaries. You showed them love without standards. Machiavelli would have called this a fatal error, a flaw that leads not only to pain but to predictable loss. When people believe they cannot lose you, they stop valuing you. And when they stop valuing you, they stop respecting you. And when they stop respecting you, they stop protecting you. The most dangerous place in the world is being lovable but not respected. Now, you must flip the balance. You must become the person they respect even if, and especially if, they do not always like you. But to reach that level of presence, you must confront the next psychological truth. Strength is not the opposite of kindness. Strength is the skeleton that holds kindness upright. Without strength, kindness collapses into manipulation. Without strength, generosity invites exploitation. Without strength, empathy becomes emotional servitude. Without strength, understanding becomes self-destruction. The softness you possess is not the problem. It is the lack of foundations beneath it. And so, your transformation begins with this realization. You must strengthen your core so that your softness no longer threatens your survival. This requires a kind of internal fortification that most people avoid. They spend their lives building walls around their hearts instead of building strength within their spirits. They confuse numbness with power. They confuse distance with control. They confuse emotional shutdown with emotional mastery. But Machiavelli would tell you this bluntly: power is not coldness. Power is clarity. Coldness is an escape. Clarity is a weapon. Coldness numbs. Clarity sharpens. Coldness disconnects you from the world. Clarity gives you control over it. And to develop this clarity, you must begin with the most brutal act of self-reflection. You must identify where you have been giving your power away. Look at the situations where you compromise yourself. Look at the faces you fear disappointing. Look at the places where your voice softens. Look at the moments where your backbone bends. Look at the fears that govern your decisions. If you are brave enough to see yourself without illusion, you will discover that your greatest enemy has always been your desire for approval. Approval is a drug. It rewires your brain. It numbs you to red flags. It blinds you to manipulation. It seduces you into betraying yourself just to taste temporary admiration. And the world has no shortage of dealers. Everyone who senses your craving for approval will eventually find a way to use it against you. Not always intentionally, not always maliciously, but inevitably, because human beings instinctively exploit the weaknesses they discover, not out of cruelty but out of survival. So you must starve the addiction, not by rejecting all affection, not by building emotional walls, but by learning a skill that almost no one in this world masters: emotional neutrality. Imagine this: someone is disappointed in you, and you feel nothing collapse inside you. Someone criticizes you, and your heartbeat doesn't change. Someone withdraws affection, and your identity remains intact. Someone slanders you, and you stay grounded in your truth. Someone disapproves, and you don't chase, don't explain, don't perform. Imagine being that emotionally sovereign. The world bows to people who do not flinch. And here is the darkest, most empowering truth of all: when you stop needing people to like you, they begin to look at you with a different kind of awe. Your silence becomes intriguing. Your distance becomes magnetic. Your boundaries become authoritative. Your refusal becomes powerful. Your lack of need becomes dominance. People are not drawn to the agreeable, they are drawn to the enigmatic. They are drawn to those who give selectively, not endlessly. They are drawn to those whose approval must be earned, not assumed. They are drawn to those who do not reveal everything, who do not respond to everything, who do not soften for everyone. This is the paradox of respect. The less you seek it, the more of it you receive. But there is a deeper level still, a transformation that goes beyond external behavior and enters the territory of psychological evolution. You must learn the art of detachment. Detachment is not indifference. Indifference is numbness. Detachment is sovereignty. Indifference is apathy. Detachment is control. Indifference is weakness disguised as strength. Detachment is strength expressed without aggression. When you are detached, you can observe without reacting. You can listen without absorbing. You can understand without internalizing. You can walk away without guilt. You can say no without fear. You can sustain boundaries without emotional collapse. Detachment gives birth to the version of you that the world cannot manipulate, because manipulation only works on people who fear losing something, fear losing approval, and people will use disapproval to control you, fear losing love, and people will withhold affection to own you, fear losing connection, and people will isolate you to reshape you, fear losing opportunity, and people will dangle promises to keep you obedient. But the person who has mastered detachment cannot be moved by these tactics. They see the strategy behind the behavior. They recognize the pattern. They understand the psychology. They remain still while the world tries to shake them. And this stillness is terrifying. People fear what they cannot influence. This is why the emotionally sovereign individual is respected even before they are understood. Something about them feels untouchable. Something feels dangerous. Something feels sharp. Something feels unpredictable. Something feels elevated. And in that elevation, the world begins to shift around you. People who once dismissed you become cautious. People who once took you for granted suddenly measure their words. People who once ignored your boundaries now ask for permission. People who once expected your compliance now seek your approval. People who once felt superior now sense a strange inferiority. This is the psychological dominance that Machiavelli admired. Not brutality, not cruelty, but composure. A person who governs themselves becomes someone others feel compelled to respect. But this transformation requires something more. You must change the architecture of your identity. You must redesign your internal structure so that respect becomes your default expectation, not through arrogance, but through authenticity. To do this, you must remove the last remnants of your old self, the self that feared disapproval, the self that softened automatically, the self that apologized for existing, the self that rationalized mistreatment, the self that lowered its volume, its presence, its worth, the self that lived for applause, the self that mistook being liked for being safe. That self must die, not through rejection, but through evolution, because deep down beneath everything you've buried lies the version of you that was never meant to bow to the world, the version that did not beg, the version that did not seek validation, the version that did not crumble under pressure, the version that did not adjust itself to fit expectations, the version that knew it deserved respect. This is the version Machiavelli wrote for, the individual whose power comes not from aggression, but from psychological mastery, the ruler of their own mind, the sovereign of their own emotions, the architect of their own presence. And as you rise into this identity, something extraordinary begins to happen. You no longer panic when someone dislikes you. In fact, you begin to understand something Machiavelli knew well, that being disliked by some people is a sign of power, not failure. It means you have disrupted the expectations that benefited them. It means you have established boundaries they cannot penetrate. It means you have developed a presence that cannot be controlled. Those who dislike you for your strength would have exploited you for your weakness. Let them dislike you. Your life is not meant to be a sanctuary for those who fear your transformation. Now your journey is entering the part that most people never reach, the part where respect grows into something even deeper, influence. Not influence built on charm, not influence built on persuasion, influence built on presence, the kind of influence that emerges when you no longer perform for approval, the kind of influence that appears when you operate from internal authority, the kind of influence that silences a room without raising your voice, the kind of influence that is felt, not spoken. But to wield this influence fully, you must step further into the shadows of truth, into the territory where people follow you not because you are agreeable, but because you are undeniably solid. This requires one final evolution. You learn, slowly and painfully, that the world does not reward purity, nor does it honor your sincerity, nor does it kneel to your intentions. It bends only to power, and power bows only to respect. Respect that is not freely given but carved out of the world like stone from a mountain. Respect that is taken, not requested. Respect that is commanded, not hoped for. Respect that grows in the silent spaces where fear and admiration meet and fuse into something irreversible. Machiavelli understood this far more deeply than the sentimental souls of his era, and certainly deeper than the sentimental souls of your own, because he saw what most people refuse to accept, that the world is built not on fairness, not on empathy, not on kindness, but on leverage. Leverage is the currency of reality, and every interaction is a quiet negotiation of strength. You have been conditioned to believe that likability is strength, that agreement is the path to harmony, that pleasing others secures your place among them. But the more you try to please, the more invisible you become. The more agreeable you are, the more forgettable you become. The more you strive to be liked, the more you ensure that no one ever truly respects you. And as Machiavelli would whisper into the ear of anyone bold enough to listen, to be liked is optional. To be respected is essential. Respect is born from consistency, boundaries, restraint, and a calm, unshakable force that does not shrink in the presence of opposition. A force that does not apologize for existing. A force that does not dilute itself in the hope that others might find it more digestible. But this force does not appear overnight. It grows in the darkness within you, like a blade hammered in fire. The world will teach you to dull that blade, to hide it, to sheath it, because a sharp mind and an unyielding spine intimidate those who depend on soft people for their comfort. They want you harmless, predictable, manageable. They want you compliant, agreeable, and infinitely patient. They want you to prioritize their approval over your authority. The more they can shape you into that mold, the less they have to confront their own inadequacies. This is why the path of respect requires dismantling the very mindset that society has spent your entire life building. You must unlearn your addiction to approval, because respect does not flow toward those who chase after validation. It flows toward those who move through the world with purpose and who are willing to be disliked in the name of their self-possession. Think of the times you felt resentment simmer beneath your politeness, the times you held your tongue when someone crossed your line, the times you said yes when every cell in your body screamed no, the times you felt smaller after trying to fit into a space that did not deserve you. Those moments were not simply acts of kindness, they were withdrawals from your personal authority, without receiving anything in return. Every time you do this, a part of you dies quietly, a part of you erodes, a part of you collapses under the weight of compromise. Machiavelli understood that people do not respect those who fold. They might appreciate them for a moment. They might even like them, but appreciation is fleeting and liking is conditional. Respect, on the other hand, is the one currency that does not devalue when times get difficult. Respect remains, respect anchors, respect protects. But to cultivate respect, you must be willing to walk into the discomfort that liking avoids. You must be willing to disappoint people. You must be willing to stop explaining yourself to those who have no authority over your life. You must be willing to let people misinterpret your intentions, misunderstand your silence, and misjudge your decisions, because the ones who depend on your endless softness will never give you respect for it. They will only demand more. Respect grows when people realize you cannot be controlled, when you refuse to bend simply to make them more comfortable, when you walk away without trembling, when you hold your boundaries without raising your voice, when your actions demonstrate that you value your time, your energy, and your presence more than their temporary approval. Respect is not created by loudness, it is created by firmness. The paradox of human psychology is that people test you most when they sense you are unwilling to stop them. They stretch your patience, they push your limits, they take your tolerance as a sign of weakness. They begin to treat your silence as permission. They begin to see your kindness as softness, and your softness as vulnerability. But the blame is not entirely theirs. The world is engineered this way. People instinctively calibrate their behavior according to what you tolerate. They adjust their dominance according to the space you allow them to occupy. If you do not define your territory, they will expand into it without hesitation. If you do not decide who you are, they will decide it for you. If you do not assert your boundaries, they will erase them. Respect begins when you understand that people treat you according to the standards you enforce, not the virtues you silently hold. The moment you shift from seeking approval to establishing presence, everything changes. You begin to speak differently, not with aggression, but with certainty. You begin to move differently, not with hesitation, but with intention. You begin to choose differently, not filtered by fear of rejection, but aligned with your internal compass, and people feel it. They sense it before you even speak. They sense the shift in your energy. They sense that you are no longer trying to fit in. You are no longer participating in the invisible dance of performative politeness. You are no longer giving away your time, your emotional bandwidth, or your attention without discernment. Your presence begins to carry weight. You become harder to manipulate, harder to guilt trip, harder to take for granted. And the more you detach from the need to be liked, the more people begin to adjust their behavior around you. They become more careful with their words. They become more thoughtful about how they approach you. They begin to recognize your self-respect, and from that, their respect emerges. Machiavelli knew that the fear of losing approval forces people into fragile lives. Lives that collapse the moment they face conflict. Lives that crumble under scrutiny. Lives built on the shaky pillars of external validation. But when a person chooses to anchor their identity in inner authority, they become unshakable. Not loud, not domineering, simply unshakable. And this unshakability creates an aura, a presence, a gravity that others cannot easily dismiss. This is the foundation of power, not domination, but the unwavering certainty of self, the willingness to accept that not everyone will understand you, not everyone will support you, not everyone will like you. And this is not a tragedy. It is liberation. The path to respect is also the path through solitude, because the moment you stop bending yourself to please others, you inevitably lose some of them. The ones who depended on your compliance will drift away. The ones who needed your softness to feel strong will distance themselves. The ones who were comfortable using you will no longer find value in you. This emptiness can feel like abandonment at first, but it is purification. Life is clearing space for people who can meet you at your strength rather than exploit your weakness. And this is exactly how Machiavelli understood alliances, not by emotional closeness, but by mutual recognition of power. Respect is the foundation of every strong alliance. Without respect, relationships weaken, they become unbalanced, they tilt toward resentment. When you stop being liked, you begin to attract those who value strength, decisiveness, and integrity. People who see you as an equal, not as a tool. People who walk beside you, not behind you or above you. You begin to enter circles that operate on a higher frequency. Circles of purpose, not convenience. Circles of influence, not dependence. Circles of mutual power, not emotional exploitation. But the world will not tell you this. Because the world benefits from your softness. It benefits from your... Which is exactly why unlocking the dark power of respect requires stepping outside the old patterns you once thought were virtues. It requires confronting the discomfort of standing firm. It requires embracing the unease of being misunderstood. It requires developing a spine where you once had only hope. And slowly, as you embody this strength, you begin to realize something vital. Respect is the only true form of security in human relationships. Not affection, not approval, not validation. Respect. This transformation also changes how you deal with conflict. When you were still addicted to being liked, conflict felt like a threat, a danger, something to avoid at any cost. But once you grow into your authority, conflict becomes something else entirely, a stage for clarity. A moment where people reveal who they really are. A moment where you reveal who you are. You stop apologizing for protecting your boundaries. You stop shrinking your presence to avoid tension. You stop negotiating your worth in situations where you are clearly being undervalued. Instead, you speak plainly. You choose actions that align with your principles, not your fears. And this clarity unsettles people because clarity is power. It sharpens the invisible lines between who you are and who others expect you to be. The more clearly you define yourself, the harder it becomes for others to rewrite your identity. But this path is not for the faint-hearted. It requires standing alone in moments where you once sought company. It requires trusting your judgment when no one validates it. It requires letting go of the comforting illusion that likability ensures safety. Machiavelli's world teaches a brutal but necessary truth, that safety comes not from being liked, but from being respected. Not from belonging to everyone, but from belonging deeply to yourself. Not from avoiding conflict, but from mastering your composure within it. When people witness your ability to remain calm while holding the line, something fundamental shifts in their perception. They may not like your stance, but they will respect your strength. And that respect becomes the foundation upon which your influence is built. You also begin to understand that your silence carries far more power than you realized. When you stop using words to explain yourself, justify yourself, convince others, or soothe their discomfort, silence becomes a tool. When you no longer rush to fill the air with reassurance, people feel the gravity of your emotions more deeply. Silence forces them to confront themselves. It forces them to consider how their actions reach that point. It forces them to recognize your distance, your withdrawal, your boundaries. Silence is not the absence of communication. It is the presence of power. Words are cheap. Silence demands interpretation. And when people are forced to interpret you, they elevate you. They begin to treat you with caution, respect, and awareness. They recognize that your approval is not easily won, and that your presence is not theirs by default. Silence, used with intention, separates the powerful from the desperate. And perhaps this is the point that most people misunderstand about the dark philosophy of respect. It is not about intimidation, it is about elevation. When you stop begging to be liked, you rise above the noise. You move into a different psychological level. You begin to operate like a person who cannot be shaken by the winds of public opinion. You begin to project an inner certainty that others instinctively follow. Even your enemies begin to acknowledge your resolve. Respect has the power to transform not only how others treat you, but how you treat yourself. You begin to honor your own time. You begin to protect your emotional energy. You begin to step back from meaningless arguments. You begin to walk away from dynamics that drain you. You begin to detach from people who cannot meet you at your level. You begin to choose solitude over shallow connections, and in doing so, you become dangerous, not because you are cruel, but because you are independent. Your independence is the one thing people will always respect, even if they fear it. Because independence means you cannot be controlled. You cannot be manipulated. You cannot be influenced by flattery or guilt. You cannot be bent by external pressure. Independence is power in its purest form. This is why Machiavelli believed that the greatest strategy is to build yourself into someone who needs nothing from those who seek to control you. Someone who offers value, not for approval, but from abundance. Someone whose presence is a privilege, not a safety net. Someone who understands that power comes not from dominating others, but from mastering themselves. And once you anchor yourself in this truth, you unlock a new level of perception. You begin to see through the illusions of social interaction. You begin to recognize manipulation instantly. You begin to observe how people use flattery to soften you, how they use guilt to control you, how they use emotional appeals to influence you. And you see through it all with a calm, Machiavellian clarity. not because you become cynical, but because you become aware. Awareness is the beginning of true power. It frees you from the narratives others try to impose on you. It frees you from your old patterns of self-sacrifice. It frees you from the fear of being disliked. Awareness strips the world of its illusions and reveals the chessboard beneath the surface. And once you see the board, you are no longer a pawn. You become a strategist. You become an observer. You become someone who moves with intention rather than impulse. Someone who speaks with purpose rather than desperation. Someone who chooses when to engage and when to withdraw. Someone who understands when respect must be given and when it must be withheld. Someone who realizes that not every war deserves their participation, and not every conflict requires their presence. This is the evolution Machiavelli intended, not to make you ruthless, but to make you sovereign. And once you taste this sovereignty, you never desire the cheap sweetness of approval again, because respect becomes a natural consequence of your presence. Not something you chase, not something you beg for, not something you trade your authenticity to obtain. It becomes something others offer willingly because they recognize your strength. And this is why the journey away from being liked toward being respected is not a descent into darkness. It is a rise into your own authority, a rise into clarity, a rise into self-possession, a rise into a life where you are no longer defined by the expectations of others. This is the dark power Machiavelli understood, the power that emerges when you stop diluting yourself, the power that awakens when you stop living for the eyes of others, the power that strengthens when you embrace solitude instead of fearing it, the power that transforms you from someone who seeks acceptance into someone who commands respect. And when you finally see the world and strength in its purest form emerges only after you have been stripped of the naive idea that being liked is a path to power. Machiavelli understood this with brutal clarity. He saw that the world divides into two types of individuals, those who seek to belong and those who seek to become. The ones who seek to belong spend their lives bending to expectations, softening their edges, making themselves comfortable for others to hold. The ones who seek to become, however, harden their edges, sharpen their presence, and create a psychic weight that forces the world to take notice. It is a far lonelier path, but it is the only one where respect becomes inevitable. As your evolution deepens, something inside you begins to shift. It's not loud and not dramatic. It's subtle, like the slow tightening of a muscle that has been weak for years. You begin to sense a different way of moving through the world, a way that doesn't revolve around being perceived as pleasant, agreeable, or harmless. Instead, your energy becomes grounded. Your decisions are steady. Your emotions are controlled. And for the first time, people feel the difference. They notice that something in you no longer seeks their approval. Something in you has detached from the need to win them over. Something in you has stepped into a deeper, colder form of self-possession. This is the moment your aura begins to change. People may not understand why, but they sense the shift instinctively. They feel a different weight when you speak, a different temperature when you enter a room, a different tension in the air when you say nothing at all. You become unpredictable in a way that makes others tread carefully. Not because you're dangerous, but because you've become unreadable. People respect what they cannot read. They become cautious around what they cannot influence. They adjust themselves to those who refuse to be molded. And that is precisely the transformation Machiavelli believed separated rulers from the ruled. The ability to stand unbent by social pressure. The ability to remain unaffected by the emotional storms of others. The ability to project authority without raising your voice. The ability to become the quiet center of gravity in the dynamics around you. Respect grows not from the noise you make, but from the silence you master. Approval grows from familiarity, respect grows from mystery. Approval grows from comfort, respect grows from tension. Approval grows from predictability, respect grows from discipline. People begin to realize that your kindness is no longer a default setting they can exploit. It is now a deliberate choice. And what people receive from you only increases in value once they understand you are capable of withholding it. This is one of the subtle truths of power. Scarcity elevates everything. Your time, your attention, your presence, once abundant and freely given, now exist behind boundaries. People must earn access to you. They must prove their alignment with your values. They must show consistency, integrity, and respect. Those who cannot will find themselves drifting away from your orbit, not because you expelled them, but because your standards rose to a level they cannot reach. And this is where the darker side of respect begins to reveal itself. Because when you stop being liked by everyone, you begin to expose the truth of who people really are underneath their polite masks. Some will resent your growth because it reminds them of their stagnation. Some will feel threatened by your independence because it makes their dependence more obvious. Some will interpret your boundaries as arrogance, your silence as hostility, your strength as rejection. And this reveals another Machiavellian truth. People do not want you to be strong. They want you to be convenient. They want you to be predictable, malleable, forgiving, easy to access, and easy to influence. The moment you break that expectation, they experience it as a personal insult, even though your transformation has nothing to do with them. When you begin to choose yourself, people who once benefited from your self-sacrifice will call you selfish. When you stop being available on demand, they will call you distant. When you stop pleasing them, they will call you difficult. When you stop explaining yourself, they will call you cold. When you stop lowering your standards, they will call you arrogant. But these are not reflections of who you are. They are reflections of what they lost the moment you stopped living for their comfort. Machiavelli would tell you to take these reactions not as punishments, but as confirmations. The noise people make when you grow is proof that your presence once served their interests more than your own. But the deeper you move into your evolution, the less such reactions disturb you. Because you begin to understand that people's judgments do not define you, they reveal them, and people who struggle to respect you will eventually remove themselves, because respect is not something that can be negotiated. It either exists naturally or disintegrates under pressure. The world begins to respond to this new presence in ways you could never predict. Doors that were once closed begin to open. Opportunities that would have passed you by suddenly slow down for you. People who overlooked you now observe you more carefully. Some with admiration, some with caution, some with envy, but they observe you nonetheless. Respect makes you visible, not because you shout, but because you command silence. And silence, when infused with authority, reorganizes the hierarchy of every social environment. But with this new visibility comes a new set of challenges. Respect is a powerful force, but it attracts attention, and attention attracts scrutiny. Some will attempt to test your resolve, searching for cracks in your foundation. They want to see if your strength is real or temporary. They want to see if your boundaries are solid or performative. They want to see if you can remain calm under pressure, or if your composure collapses when your values are challenged. These tests are inevitable, and yet passing them doesn't require force, it requires restraint. The person who is secure in their power does not need to prove it. The moment you feel the urge to prove yourself, you've already stepped out of your center. The true strength of respect is that it doesn't need validation. One of the most profound shifts that occurs as you evolve into this darker, more strategic form of self-possession is your relationship with confrontation. When you used to operate from a desire to be liked, confrontation felt like chaos. It felt dangerous and destabilizing, something you wanted to avoid at all costs. But now, confrontation becomes a mirror. It reflects back the truth of any relationship. You begin to see the dynamics clearer than ever. You see who tries to overpower you, who tries to guilt you, who tries to deceive you, who tries to undermine you, who tries to manipulate you. And your responses become measured, precise, and infused with a quiet confidence that strips the emotional charge from every conflict. When you know who you are, the behavior of others cannot shake you, and this composure is terrifying to those who depend on emotional chaos to maintain control. People who use guilt, outbursts, or emotional manipulation expect reactions. They expect you to panic. They expect you to fold. They expect you to adjust yourself to soothe their instability. When you no longer do this, their tactics lose power. You become immune to their emotional storms, and once they realize their storms cannot move you, something shifts permanently. Respect replaces manipulation. Boundaries replace demands. Distance replaces dependency. This is the birthplace of authority, and authority is the soil in which respect grows deepest. But authority does not only shape how others treat you, it transforms how you treat yourself. You stop tolerating your own excuses. You stop allowing your weaker impulses to sabotage your progress. You stop being lenient with the parts of yourself that cling to old patterns. The more you commit to becoming someone worthy of respect, the more discipline becomes your natural state. You begin to wake up with intention, not distraction. You begin to focus on the essential, not the trivial. You begin to invest in your mind, your craft, your mission. And slowly, you eliminate everything that pulls you away from your purpose. This inner alignment radiates outward, becoming the blueprint for how the world must treat you. Machiavelli believed that discipline is the highest demonstration of self-respect, because discipline is proof that you value your future more than your impulses. It is proof that you hold yourself to a higher standard than the world expects from you, and that level of internal respect becomes a silent command. People feel it before you say a word. They feel it in your posture, in your decisions, in your restraint, in your calmness, in your confidence. Respect begins inside before it ever echoes outside. But with this transformation comes a brutal realization: your old identity must die. The version of you that was molded by fear, shaped by approval, softened by insecurity, that version cannot follow you into the future. It cannot carry the weight of the authority you are building. It cannot stand under the pressure of the respect you wish to command. It cannot survive the solitude required to evolve. Becoming someone who is respected means killing the old self, gently, slowly, deliberately, the same way a sculptor chips away at the excess stone until the final form emerges. The world sees strength, but they do not see what you had to destroy within yourself to create it. You must destroy your people-pleasing. You must destroy your avoidance of conflict. You must destroy your fear of being misunderstood. You must destroy your habit of shrinking yourself. You must destroy the need to justify your boundaries. You must destroy your addiction to validation. Destruction is uncomfortable but necessary. The old self will fight for survival. It will whisper doubts. It will crave approval again. It will try to drag you back into familiar patterns. But each time you resist, your authority strengthens. Each time you refuse to fold, your respect deepens. Each time you hold the line, your identity sharpens. The world begins to adjust to the new you. Friends who only valued your softness will fall away. Those intimidated by your strength will quietly resent you. Those who admired your old self may claim you've changed, as if growth were a betrayal. But new people will arrive, people who operate at your level of discipline, people who respect your boundaries without questioning them, people who admire your independence rather than fear it, people who see strength as an invitation, not a threat. Your world reshapes itself around your new identity, and for the first time, the people in your life reflect who you truly are, rather than who you used to pretend to be. And then comes the deepest realization of all: you never needed to be liked. You needed to be respected. You needed to be understood. You needed to be seen for your strength, not your softness. You needed to stand alone long enough to know you could walk anywhere without needing the company of approval. This is the moment you understand the core of Machiavelli's dark wisdom. People do not follow what they like. They follow what they fear losing. And a person who respects themselves is someone others fear losing. Because self-respect is rare, boundaries are rare, discipline is rare, independence is rare, silence is rare, strength is rare. You have become rare, and rarity is power. This is where your transformation prepares you for the final evolution, the one where respect becomes not just a shield, but a force that shapes the world around you, where you stop trying to control how others see you and instead control how you see yourself, where the old self dissolves and the dark, powerful, disciplined version of you stands unchallenged. And now, only one final step remains. And now the final truth begins to form, rising from the shadows like a figure you've sensed for years but never had the courage to face. Everything until this point, every fracture, every awakening, every quiet rebellion against your old identity, was only preparation. Preparation for the moment when you finally understand why Machiavelli insisted that respect is not simply one element of power. It is the very essence of it, the skeleton of influence, the architecture of authority, the invisible throne from which you command your life without ever raising your voice. But standing here, on the edge of that realization, you feel something else too, a faint trembling inside you, like the final echo of the old self begging to survive, because the shift you are about to make is permanent. It is irreversible. It demands the burial of every version of you that once pleaded to be chosen, seen, liked, approved of. This is the moment where the war becomes internal. Not the war against others, not the war against society's expectations, not the war against manipulation or emotional exploitation. Those were merely battles. The real war is the one you wage against the part of yourself that still longs for softness, for belonging, for the safety of being accepted. The self that seeks comfort in the illusion that harmony is achieved by appeasing everyone. The self that thinks sacrifice is noble when it is simply self-erasure in disguise. Machiavelli knew that conquering the world begins with conquering yourself, and conquering yourself means silencing the voice that whispers, "Just be liked, it's easier." But easier is not what you came here for. Easier is what kept you small. Easier is what made you predictable. Easier is what made others comfortable while you suffocated. And now you find yourself at a crossroads that feels less like a choice and more like a transformation already in motion. You feel the tension in your chest, the tightening of something ancient and instinctive, something your ancestors felt before battles, not panic but awakening, not fear but recognition. Because deep within the psyche lies a truth older than civilization. You were not born to be liked. You were born to stand with a spine. You were born to shape your environment. You were born to carry a presence that makes others adjust. Respect is your natural state. You simply forgot it. As you peel away the remnants of your past identity, something powerful emerges, an emotional stillness, a clarity that feels almost cold, but in a liberating way. You no longer search for the warmth of approval. You no longer shrink away from conflict. You no longer fear the consequences of being yourself fully. You begin to realize that the world cannot intimidate a person who is no longer afraid to be alone. Loneliness was the weapon the world used to control you. But solitude, true solitude, has become your armor. In solitude, you learned self-respect. In solitude, you learned discipline. In solitude, you learned what you will and will not tolerate. In solitude, you sharpened yourself until you became unbendable. And now, the world must face the version of you forged in the silence they thought would break you. You carry yourself differently. Your calm is heavier. Your gaze lasts a second longer than before. Your boundaries are carved in something far stronger than emotion. They are carved in identity. You no longer negotiate your values to keep the peace. You no longer dilute your intentions to seem agreeable. You no longer soften your truth to protect the frailty of others. Instead, you walk with the unmistakable presence of someone who knows exactly who they are. And this presence reshapes every interaction you have. People may not understand the specifics of your transformation, but they feel it. They feel the gravity around you, the tension in your silence, the authority in your restraint, the unspoken demand you carry, not for admiration but for respect. Respect is the silent command that radiates from every part of you. You begin to realize that true power doesn't shout, it doesn't threaten, it doesn't beg, it simply is. And this is why those who operate with true strength rarely need to prove anything. Their presence alone is enough to shift dynamics, redirect conversations, and reorder hierarchies. When you speak now, your words land differently, not because you speak louder, but because you speak from a place that can no longer be shaken. People sense that you are not looking for their agreement, and this alone forces them to evaluate your words more carefully. The absence of need creates the presence of power. Those who once took advantage of your softness will now tread differently. They will test your boundaries less frequently. They will measure their tone when they speak to you. They will think twice before making demands. Some will resent you for this. Others will admire you for it. But regardless of their emotional response, they will respect you. They will feel the shift in the air around you and realize they no longer have access to the version of you they once manipulated. And quietly, you begin to notice something else. The people who once held power over you no longer do. Their disappointment no longer cripples you. Their opinions no longer define you. Their rejection no longer wounds you. Approval becomes irrelevant. You have stepped into a different psychological realm where your value is internally governed, not externally negotiated. This is the liberation Machiavelli spoke of, not the liberation of circumstance, but the liberation of mind. For until your mind is free, your life is not. And yet, as you enter this higher tier of identity, something shifts once again, something subtle but transformative. You start to see the world with a clarity that was impossible when you were entangled in the need to be liked. You begin to understand human behavior at a deeper, almost frightening level. You see how easily people give themselves away, how quickly they reveal their motivations, how instinctively they seek validation from others. You see how weakness hides behind politeness, how insecurity hides behind arrogance, how desperation hides behind over-explaining. You see how people betray themselves with every unnecessary apology, every nervous laugh, every attempt to earn favor, and you no longer participate in the very behaviors you now recognize as chains. You begin to analyze interactions, not emotionally, but strategically. When someone raises their voice, you notice the insecurity behind it. When someone withdraws affection, you see the manipulation in the silence. When someone flatters you excessively, you recognize the hidden agenda behind the sweetness. When someone tries to provoke you, you feel the weakness behind their aggression. You no longer react. You observe. You no longer absorb. You assess. You no longer chase. You choose. This is the psychological ground where respect becomes automatic, for others and for yourself. One of the most potent changes that comes with this new self is the disappearance of your fear of rejection. For the first time, perhaps in your entire life, you understand that rejection is simply redirection, and in many cases, protection. You begin to see that loss is not damage. Loss is alignment. Anyone who walks away because you refuse to be small is not a loss. They are filtration. Your self-respect eliminates people who were never meant to walk with the strongest version of you. And through this filtration, your world becomes more refined, more intentional, more honest. Those who surround you now do not stay because you make yourself easy. They stay because they see your value and choose to rise to meet it. As your identity stabilizes into this new form, an even darker yet empowering truth emerges. Power is quiet because it is internal. It is not obtained from others, it is obtained from the self. And once you have it, no one can take it. People can challenge your opinions, but they cannot shake your conviction. They can disagree with your actions, but they cannot break your discipline. They can withdraw their approval, but they cannot touch your self-respect. Power becomes the invisible shield you carry with you in every situation. It protects you not by intimidating others, but by fortifying you. Yet, even this realization is not the end of your evolution. There is one more transformation, one final shift that completes the journey from seeking approval to commanding respect. It is the shift from internal strength to external influence. Because once you embody respect, you begin to create it in others. Not through coercion, but through example. Your presence forces people to confront their own weaknesses. Your discipline inspires their discipline. Your boundaries teach them how to build their own. Your refusal to be manipulated shows them where they have been manipulated. Your independence becomes the mirror that exposes their dependence. You become a force, not by power over others, but by power over yourself. And this, ironically, becomes the source of influence others cannot resist. Because people follow strength, people follow sovereignty, people follow those who need nothing yet offer everything. You become someone whose respect means something because you do not give it lightly. Someone whose approval is meaningful because you do not distribute it without discernment. Someone whose presence is rare and therefore unforgettable. And now you stand at the final threshold Machiavelli spoke of, the point where respect is no longer something you earn, it is something you embody. The point where your life becomes the arena upon which the new version of you stands unopposed, unshaken, and undeniable. The point where you no longer live for others, but live for the mission carved into your bones. The point where your past no longer binds you, your fears no longer command you, and your weaknesses no longer define you. This is where the story turns inward again, not toward contemplation, but toward action. You feel it building inside you, like a storm tightening with purpose. The old self is silent now, not weakened, but dead. Your spine feels heavier, not with burden, but with strength. Your chest feels fuller, not with fear, but with certainty. Your mind feels sharper, not with anxiety, but with direction. You have become the kind of person Machiavelli wrote for, the kind of person who stands unafraid in the face of judgment, unbent by the expectations of others, unmoved by the winds of popularity. And now only one thing remains. The final step is not philosophical, it's not theoretical, it's not internal, it is action. The world respects those who act in alignment with their identity, those who enforce their boundaries without hesitation, those who walk away when they are undervalued, those who speak truth even when silence would be easier, those who choose themselves without apology, those who do not wait for permission, those who do not fear disapproval, those who are willing, fully, completely, to be disliked in the name of becoming unfuckwithable. This is your moment to step into that version of yourself. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, not when others accept it. Now, because the world bends for those who refuse to bend. The world fears losing those who fear nothing. The world makes room for those who stand tall, even when standing tall costs them everything. And respect, the dark, quiet, unshakable force that shapes empires, is waiting for you to claim it. So step forward. Step without apology. Step without hesitation. Step without needing anyone's approval. Stop being liked, become respected, and unleash the power you were born to carry. Now go and act.